Because sometimes being available, being present, being consistent, it all gets taken for granted. You gave so much of yourself that they stopped noticing. You were always there, answering the calls, sending the messages, forgiving the silence, fixing what they kept breaking. And in doing that, they got comfortable, too comfortable. They started mistaking your loyalty for weakness. They saw your forgiveness as permission. Your patience became something they felt entitled to. They forgot that you were a choice, not a guarantee. And the truth is, your presence was powerful, but it was also quiet. It was soft in how it showed up. In the little things, the check-ins, the thoughtful messages, the emotional support, the effort you made when they didn't ask but clearly needed. You were always giving, always loving, always hoping they would eventually see it, but they didn't. Because people often don't recognize peace until they're left in the chaos. They don't understand the depth of your love until they experience shallow connections. They don't realize how safe you made them feel until they're surrounded by people who only take. And that's why your absence has to speak. It's in your absence that they'll finally understand what you truly meant to them. It's the silence that will echo louder than any words you ever said. It's the empty space you used to fill so effortlessly, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, that will haunt them. They'll start to notice the void. They'll pick up their phone and realize no one checks on them the way you did. They'll go through something hard and realize no one sits with them in their pain like you used to. They'll laugh and no one will laugh back with that same warmth. They'll cry and no one will hold their heart with that same gentleness. Because what they had with you wasn't ordinary, but they treated it like it was, and now your absence becomes their teacher, not out of pettiness, not as revenge, but as reality. The reality that someone who showed up every day with love and intention is now gone. The reality that you're not answering anymore. You're not explaining yourself. You're not trying to be understood. You're just gone, and maybe they'll act unbothered. Maybe they'll post like they're fine. But deep down, they'll remember how safe they felt with you. How seen, how cared for, because your presence was rare, but they needed your absence to realize it. They just couldn't see it, or maybe they saw it, but they weren't ready for the kind of love you came with, the kind that challenges, heals, and holds at the same time. You were the person who showed up with a full heart, who gave without keeping score, who saw the pain behind their anger and stayed when most would have left. And somehow they made you feel like too much, too emotional, too available, too intense, too deep. But none of that was ever a flaw. It was your gift. Your ability to love deeply, to care genuinely, to show up when it wasn't convenient. That's what made you rare. And still, they acted like loving you was a task instead of a privilege. You were a safe space. You were consistency in their chaos. You were the one who remembered the small things, who celebrated their quiet wins, who held it down when everything was falling apart. They were used to people who only came around when it benefited them, who gave halfway, who loved conditionally. So when you came in and gave fully, they didn't know what to do with it. Instead of receiving you with gratitude, they treated you like a weight. Not because you were heavy, but because they lacked the strength to carry something real, and so you started to question yourself. Started wondering if maybe you were the problem. Maybe you were asking for too much by wanting honesty. Maybe you were being needy by needing consistency. Maybe you were being dramatic for wanting to feel emotionally safe. But none of that made you a burden. It made you human. It made you someone who understands that love isn't just about being there when it's easy. It's about showing up when it's hard. And that's exactly what you did. You showed up. Even on the days when they gave you nothing to hold onto, you still chose them. You still stayed. And what did they do with that? They made you feel like you were too hard to love. But the truth is, you weren't hard to love. They were just unequipped to handle love in its raw, honest, powerful form. They wanted something easy, something surface level, something they didn't have to grow for. You weren't a burden. You were the mirror. You reflected what they weren't ready to face. You exposed the parts of them that needed healing. And instead of rising to meet the love you offered, they ran from it. They mistook your strength for pressure, your honesty for criticism, your care for control. They didn't realize that what they had wasn't someone trying to take from them. It was someone trying to pour into them, to uplift them, to walk with them through the things they were afraid to say out loud. You didn't bring problems, you brought light to the ones they were trying to avoid. You were real, your love was grounded, intentional, steady. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. You showed up with substance, not games, not confusion, not temporary highs. You didn't offer a fantasy. You offered something lasting, something rooted in emotional depth and truth. But they didn't want real, at least not then. They chased distractions that looked good but lacked meaning. They ran after temporary connections that didn't require accountability, didn't ask for growth, didn't hold up a mirror to their flaws. Because illusions are easy, they're shiny, they give the rush without the responsibility, and they mistook that excitement for love. But love isn't just chemistry, it's consistency. It's choosing someone even when it's not convenient. It's showing up on the hard days, not just the fun ones. You were that. You were a home, not a thrill. And in a world addicted to quick fixes and short-term validation, being a home felt boring to someone who hadn't learned to appreciate peace. So they fumbled you, not because you weren't enough, but because they weren't ready to stop chasing illusions that fed their ego while starving their soul. They traded the security of your love for the unpredictability of something that looked better in the moment. But illusions don't last. They fade. They reveal themselves eventually. And when they do, all that's left is the reality they weren't ready to face. They had something rare and they lost it. They'll remember the way you stayed when things got difficult. How you didn't just speak love, you lived it. You were consistent, even when they were distant. You made space for their healing, even when yours was incomplete. You were real in a way that didn't need attention, because it spoke through action, not performance. The people they ran toward may have looked exciting, may have said the right things, may have given them a taste of freedom, freedom from growth, from commitment, from truth. But none of it was rooted. None of it could weather the storms, and now they're left trying to make sense of how they let something so solid slip through their hands. Because you didn't just love them, you saw them, the real them, not the version they curated, not the mask they wore. You saw their pain, their patterns, their potential, and you still chose them. You didn't love them for what they could give. You loved them for who they were and who they could become. But they weren't ready for that kind of love. They wanted easy. They wanted validation. They wanted something that felt good without asking too much of them. So they gambled your loyalty for a momentary illusion, thinking they could come back if it didn't work out. Thinking you'd still be there. Thinking something real would wait forever while they explored what was fake. There comes a point when you realize that getting even doesn't bring the peace you thought it would. That proving a point to someone who never valued you in the first place isn't worth the energy it costs. You don't need to beg them to understand, and you don't have to show up just to show them what they missed. Because the truth is, the greatest form of closure doesn't come from them. It comes from who you become without them. They might have disrespected you, lied to you, played with your heart like it was something they could borrow and return whenever it suited them. They thought you'd break, maybe even wanted you to, and for a while, maybe you did. You were hurt, confused, angry. You went back and forth between wanting to scream and wanting to stay silent. You imagined what you'd say if you had the chance. You wanted them to feel just an ounce of the pain they put you through. But that's where growth enters. That moment when your pain turns into purpose, that shift where you no longer want to destroy them, you just want to heal you. That's power. That's when you start to see the difference between reacting and rising. Revenge is loud, but growth is louder. Revenge is temporary. It gives you a moment, maybe even a little satisfaction, but it doesn't build anything lasting. It keeps you tied to the person who hurt you, but growth frees you. It takes what was meant to break you and turns it into the very foundation you build your new self on. You don't need to post about it. You don't need to throw shade or circle back just to show off. You don't need to be in the same room to let them see how far you've come. The people who tried to minimize you will hear about your glow without you having to say a word, because real healing shines. Real healing changes your energy, your standards, your peace, and that speaks for itself. When you stop trying to rewrite the past and instead focus on building a better future, everything shifts. You stop seeking justice from someone incapable of giving it. You stop replaying the scenario in your head, hoping for a different outcome. You accept what happened, and more importantly, you outgrow it. Your elevation is the message. Your peace is the proof. The way you smile now, the way you move now, the way you protect your space now, that's the result of everything they thought would destroy you. And they'll see it. Whether you ever talk again or not, they'll feel it, not through your words, but through your absence. Through the version of you they can no longer reach. You didn't need to make them feel small. You just needed to remember how big your spirit is when it's not weighed down by pain they caused. They told you that you were too much, too emotional, too intense, too sensitive. They made you feel like your love was overwhelming, like your standards were unrealistic, like your presence demanded more than they were willing to give. And maybe for a while you believed it. You started shrinking yourself second, guessing your worth, questioning if maybe you really were the problem. But the truth is, you weren't hard to love. You were just trying to love someone who wasn't ready to be loved the way you do it. Because your love isn't shallow. It doesn't stay on the surface. It dives deep. It sees beyond what people show and touches the parts they try to hide. You pay attention. You remember the little things. You ask questions not just to talk, but to understand. You care with your whole heart, and not everyone knows what to do with something that real. Some people aren't afraid of being unloved. They're afraid of being fully seen. And that's what your love does, it sees. It doesn't skip over the wounds or sugarcoat the truth. Your love invites growth, not just comfort. It holds people accountable while still holding them close. That's not too much, that's rare. And rare can feel unfamiliar to someone who only knows love as something they have to chase, earn, or perform for. You tried to meet them where they were, didn't you? Tried to be patient, tried to be understanding. You gave them grace again and again, thinking if you just loved them enough, maybe they'd finally feel safe. Maybe they'd open up. Maybe they'd see that you weren't there to hurt them, you were there to heal with them. But they weren't ready, and readiness has nothing to do with your worth. They couldn't receive what you gave because they never learned how to. Maybe they were used to chaos. Maybe they confused love with inconsistency. Maybe they weren't used to someone loving them without an agenda. So when you showed up with something real, they pulled away. Not because you were wrong, but because they weren't ready for right. They needed healing, They needed self-awareness. They needed to face things you weren't meant to fix. And sometimes, no matter how much love you offer, it won't be enough for someone who hasn't done the work to believe they deserve it. So don't carry the weight of their unreadiness. Don't wear their fears as your flaws. Don't silence your heart because someone else couldn't hear its rhythm. You weren't asking for too much. You were offering more than they knew how to hold. And one day, maybe they'll realize it. Maybe they'll remember the way you showed up, the way you stayed, the way you gave love that didn't ask for masks or performances. But by then, you'll know it was never about being hard to love. It was about giving your heart to someone who didn't know how to hold it without dropping it. You held on longer than you should have, not because you were weak, but because you believed in the potential of what could have been. You saw the light in them, even when they only showed you shadows. You kept giving chances, hoping this time would be different, that maybe they'd show up for you the way you kept showing up for them. But sometimes love doesn't fix people. Sometimes your presence only delays the lesson they need to learn on their own. So let them go. Let them feel what life is like without the safety of your love, without your late night check-ins, your soft words, your unwavering support. Let them sit with the silence you used to fill. Let them feel the weight of your absence, the kind that creeps in slowly and stays long after they pretend it doesn't matter. Because people don't always learn through conversation, they learn through consequence. You told them how you felt. You explained your needs. You gave them every opportunity to choose you, fully, honestly, consistently. But they chose comfort, ego, pride, or maybe just fear. And now, the version of you who bent and broke to make things work is gone. Let them learn what it means to lose someone who loved without conditions. Let them experience the difference between being tolerated and being truly cherished. Let them discover that not everyone is going to see them the way you did, through eyes that looked past their flaws and still chose to stay. Let them realize how rare it was to be met with that kind of loyalty. You're not their lesson to learn anymore. You're not their emotional crutch. You're not their emergency contact when the world feels heavy. You've been that person, and you did it out of love. But now the most loving thing you can do is let them face themselves, without your voice guiding them, without your energy holding them together, without your love acting as their safety net. Let them wish they hadn't taken you for granted. Let them wish they hadn't ignored the times you cried quietly, hoping they'd notice. Let them remember the days you forgave things you shouldn't have, just to keep the connection alive. Let them play back every moment they dismissed you, minimized you, or made you feel like you were asking for too much when all you really wanted was to feel secure. They'll look back and realize that peace doesn't come wrapped in apologies. It comes in the form of the one who kept showing up for them. They'll try to replace what you gave with quick fixes, empty flings, or surface-level distractions. But none of it will match the depth you offered. None of it will feel like home the way you did, so let them go. Not out of spite, not for revenge, but because you finally love yourself enough to stop holding the door open for someone who was never ready to walk through it. When someone truly sees you, your heart, your effort, your presence, they don't wait until you're gone to realize what they had. They feel it in the moment. They respond to it. They protect it. Because real recognition doesn't need loss to be activated. It moves in real time, through appreciation, through intentional actions, through consistent care. The one who values you won't play with you like you're replaceable. They won't gamble your loyalty hoping you'll still be there after they've entertained their options. They won't treat your emotional labor like something they can dip into when it's convenient and abandon when it's not. They'll show you, day by day, that they don't need absence to understand the privilege of your presence. Because value is a mindset. It's how someone chooses to see you, not just when you're giving, but also when you're tired. Not just when you're happy, but when you're vulnerable. The right person doesn't need the wake-up call of losing you to understand that what they have is rare. They don't take you for granted while you're pouring your heart into them. They recognize it while it's happening. And because they recognize it, they nurture it. But too often, people mistake consistent love for something guaranteed. They get so used to you showing up that they stop showing up for you. They assume you'll always be there, always forgiving, always waiting, until one day you're not. And that's when they suddenly start remembering everything you were, the way you listened, the way you understood things they never even said, the way you loved them even when they were hard to love. But someone who truly values you won't need that kind of regret to see your worth. They won't need you to leave for them to wake up. They'll already be awake. They'll already be pouring into the connection while it's alive, not writing long texts after it's dead. And yes, some people grow too late. They realize after the damage is done, after you've healed, after you've learned how to protect your energy. But that's not love, that's guilt, that's memory, that's the sting of missed opportunity. Love sees your value in the present. Love doesn't require a loss to learn a lesson. The right one will treasure you without the tragedy. They won't need time apart to learn how to treat you right. They'll understand the depth of your presence while it's still being offered. They'll reciprocate. They'll show up with clarity, not confusion, with intention, not inconsistency, with real love, not just longing after the fact, because your worth isn't something that appears after you walk away. It was there the whole time, and the one meant for you will see it, not in your absence, but in your presence. Not when you're gone, but while you're standing right in front of them. In the end, your love was never the problem. Their inability to receive it was. You were real, consistent, and intentional in a world that often confuses depth with difficulty. Let them go. Let them learn, let them regret, because your absence will echo louder than your presence ever did in their life. You don't need revenge, closure, or validation from those who couldn't see your worth. Your growth, your healing, your peace, that's the real victory. The one who's truly meant for you will value you fully, without needing to lose you first to understand what they had.